I'm gonna show you how the left and the right play this game, right? And black people are really stuck in the middle, and they got to be smart enough to recognize just how much, they're stuck in the middle, and how much each side of the arm of white, or the system of white supremacy, uses black people, for their causes, both right and left. Now, in my opinion, the system of white supremacy operates for itself. It doesn't, particularly have a side. It's just a different way of going about it. Where, what is going on? I don't even know what's going on right now. Where, the left, it likes to do things more subtly. And the right likes to do things more overtly. And, the right, they love to cater to their audience of poor working class whites, white fragility, the whites that, don't realize that America is really a system of classism more so than it's a system of racism. So if you're a white person and you're in a particular class, what you should be doing is you should be identifying with the other people, regardless of race, who are in the same class as you. But that's not what white people do. What white people do is white people identify with the racial identity before they identify, with the class identity. Now, they'll sit there and they'll argue and they'll put that on black people, but it's like, no, black people are responding to the way that the dominant society and the dominant members of society move and operate. It would serve no purpose for a black person to identify with white people based on class than his own people based on race, when white people don't operate like that. They don't operate on class. They operate on race. So a black person operating on class and trying to rub shoulders with white people, thinking that that's how they operate as well, that he would be living in a fallacy, or that black person would be living in a fantasy world. That's not how white people move or operate. So anyway, why am I bringing all this stuff up, right? I'm laying the backdrop about what I'm about to discuss because, me, love the Second Amendment, wish black people would embrace it more. I mean, even though we have embraced it, since, the beginning of COVID, but I mean, openly embrace it. Like I told you, Democrats can't win without black people. So if black people say, hey, this is off limits, this is off the table, that's the end of gun control. I'm saying if they want to win. But black people are more caught up in, party loyalty and symbolism and, feel-goodery. And, we got a whole, generation of black baby boomers that, they don't, they're still operating in the fantasy world. Oh, them Republicans is racist, which they are. But it's kind of like, pick your poison. What do you want? Overt racism or covert racism? Which one do you want? You're going to get racism either way. You're going to get white supremacy either way. How do you want your white supremacy? You want it, woo-ha, all up in your face? Or do you want it to be, passive aggressive racism with many microaggressions, right? Now, personally, I like my racism out in the open. That way, you know where somebody stands and you know how you should move accordingly. I don't need somebody smiling in my face and then walking away and then saying underneath their breath, nigger. I don't need that shit. But anyway, so I'm watching these videos on the Second Amendment, right? So I say, let me go online and see if anybody's telling the truth about the Second Amendment. And what I notice about these videos is these videos are coming from the left. Now, you won't know that until you get to the end of the video where they jump out of nowhere and they're like, the NRA is evil. And this is why the NRA, the most evil corporation in the world, muhaha, must be destroyed. And I'm like, but everything that you said in the video, if the NRA is in large part the only organization, I know there's Guns of America, if they're in large part the only organization that's actually, going to Congress, lobbying, supporting, gun rights laws, even as it pertains to black people, like the McDonald case, right? Or the Shaneen Allen case, which nobody talks about, but they want to say, they already didn't support Philando Castile. And I've already talked about that. And yeah, even I felt some type of way that there wasn't some big, giant statement that they came out with. But remember, the freaking NRA and all these gun-loving white people, they got to walk this tightrope, right? Where the enforcers of the law, the police officers, they got to walk this tightrope where, you know, we're law enforcement's best friends, right? Keep the niggas in check, but we're law enforcement's best friends. We're not going to go up against law enforcement because we want them to support our Second Amendment rights, even though, technically speaking, it's virtually impossible for those two things to operate in the same space. You know, the argument against a tyrannical government and, you know, Blue Lives Matter and we support law enforcement. They can hardly occupy the same space. Because if tyranny were ever to happen, who would be the spear tip of tyranny? Local and law enforcement. That's why you got Reno May, for example, you know, who loves to make jokes about the ATF and killing your dog. And then the ATF trolls back and then sells a stuffed dog on their website. Now, if you don't know, I think the whole killing your dog thing came out from Ruby Ridge because they shot the dog. Like the dog needed to be shot in Ruby Ridge. Right, which set the whole thing off with Ruby Ridge. Then it was Waco, Texas, and then you had, you know, the Unabomber go out there and go crazy, and that's why he said he did it. And this is where you get all the beginnings of a lot of the militias and the real strong anti-government. You know, we're all going off in the woods somewhere, and you know, we're engaging in the Second Amendment. They're more anti-government than they are more, you know, anti-black people or anti any other minority. You got to keep your group straight. Now, I'm not saying it is an overlap, but you got to keep the group straight. But anyway, so I'm watching these videos on the Second Amendment and whatnot, and they're coming from leftists. Now, what the leftists are doing, and it's smart. They're telling the truth about gun control. Now, they try to tippy-toe a little bit because, you know, they first off, we have to understand that it was white Southerners that, you know, pushed a lot of the most egregious, you know, gun control laws, you know, black codes and all that other stuff. And they were Democrats, right? But this white Southerners, like I said, the South didn't migrate to the North and the North didn't migrate to the South. Okay, that's why those people are holding Confederate flags screaming heritage, not hate. The same people who are Republicans today in the South, their grandfathers' bloodline were Democrats. Their grandfathers were Strom Thurmond. Their grandfathers were Bull Connor. So when they try to act like, when the right tries to make this argument like, no, see, the Democrats are the real racists, they're being intellectually dishonest. Okay? And when the left tries to, you know, claim like, you know, that like they really try to distance themselves from that, they're also being intellectually dishonest. Right? Because I'd say that the liberal Northerners, which I do believe are a different group, again, it's, you know, the whole way that white supremacy moves from the white liberal elite standpoint is much more sophisticated. It goes back to that, what was that guy's name? The freaking, damn, I can't think, Lee Atwater. You know, the one that was talking about, you know, in 1956, you know, you could say, you know, nigger, but, you know, after 1968 or whatever, you can't say that anymore. You got to be more sophisticated. You got to talk about things abstract, like busing, and talk about things that would, you know, hurt black people more than they would hurt white people. You got to talk in code. That's basically what he was saying. So there was a more sophisticated way that white supremacy went about, because white people, at the end of the day, they want to come off like, you know, they're the benevolent force in the universe, and if it wasn't for them, you know, the world would just, you know, fall into chaos, right? This is what, you know, what white supremacy is all about. But here's the thing, right? This goes into critical race theory, right? Let me make sure I'm still recording, right? So this goes into critical race theory. This is what I noticed, right? So the left puts out these videos acknowledging all the bullshit. You know, gun control is really racist. You know, you had the the black code laws, you know, after the Civil War. They didn't want black people having guns for obvious reasons, right? You know, who wants to have the ex-slave population having firearms, right? Going back to what Malcolm X said in 1963. White people's greatest fear is that black people are going to do unto white people as white people have done unto black people. So we got to keep them, we got to prevent them from having guns. All gun control is racist. It's flat out, it's racist. Now, after that, you had the 1968 freaking crime bill. You had which set up the whole thing with, you know, if you're a felon, right, then you start locking niggas up left and right. right? Then you got even before that, you got 1967. They said, oh, if you live in public housing, black people lived disproportionately in public housing, right? Because of urban renewal, right? They said, oh, you couldn't own a gun if you lived in public housing. That was smacked down underneath. I don't think it was McDonald. No, it wasn't McDonald. It was smacked down underneath. I think it was a black lady in Baltimore, and she lived in public housing. I think it was her, if I'm not wrong. It was an older black lady. She lived in public housing. The neighborhood was getting bad. She wanted to get a gun, and then they wouldn't let her get a gun. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure it was an older black woman. And I think that was a case that the NRA also backed, which nobody discusses. All they want to say is, Philando Castile, and the NRA didn't say anything, right? Which, yes, the NRA dropped the ball on Philando Castile, right? Because I told you they're trying to do that balancing act between, we Blue Lives Matter, we support law enforcement, until it's, ATF killing your dog, kicking in your front door, and all that shit in Ruby Ridge and Waco, Texas. Then all of a sudden it's tyranny. When police brutality affects white people, just remember this. When police brutality affects white people, it's tyranny. When police brutality affects black people, it's them niggas wouldn't comply. Okay, just remember that. That's how the shit works in America. Okay, white people affected by the police brutality, tyranny. Get your guns, get your muskets, get your AR-15s. Right, the tree of liberty must be refreshed. When police brutality affects black people, it's because he wasn't listening. He wasn't following orders. He wasn't following instructions. It's the way it is, right? This is the double standard of the system of white supremacy. Get used to it, right? So I'm saying that this is what I noticed, right? They talked about the Saturday night special. And I'm saying, I've seen people on the right talk about this. When white people want to defend their Second Amendment rights, these white folks on the right. See, because they're getting hit from all sides. The liberals are very effective at language. They're very effective at, understanding culture. We must get the younger generation. I've been bitching about that for years when it comes to the Second Amendment community. I go to Second Amendment meetings. I look around. It's nothing but a bunch of 50, 60-year-old white men. You know what I mean? I'm like, in the next 25 years, most of y'all ain't even going to be here. You know what I mean? You're not going to be here. Where are your sons, right? This is me as a black man saying that to white men. I'm like, you all are lazy. You all suck. I'm like, where are your sons? Right? I understand that they don't really care for me being there. And College Humor did a hilarious skit on that, with a black identity extremist versus these two white guys that were, these pro-gun Second Amendment advocates. It's a parody. It's hilarious. But that embodies everything about the whole issue between, gun rights are for white people, not for black people. But anyway, this is what I noticed. And I keep getting off topic because I gotta bring it all in. I gotta touch all this, right? Because I got idiots in the background and slow people and everything that I have to address. Why my videos end up being much longer than they need to be. But anyway, this is what I noticed, right? When it comes to the right, and they finally get around acknowledging all the racist shit. Oh, gun control is racist. Oh, black guy, join us. Join the NRA because gun control is racist, right? Because they need the numbers. They're like, shit. The left's got all the youth, all the kids that are 18, or 16 to 24. They're like, yeah, gun control, LGBT, yeah. They're up there, with all that dumb shit, There's 46 flavors of genders, yeah. They're all up there. Boys are confused. I'm like, we sitting there in the manosphere looking at them like, And in the next 15 years, when you end up having kids and a family and somebody breaks into the house, you know what I mean? When you turn over and you look at your wife and say, equality, let's go downstairs together. Or, you look at her as a scared little bitch because you haven't developed your manhood and your courage. Man, please, that'll be the last vajayjay that you don't ever got. That'll be the last of it that you ever got. You know what I mean? Again, you gotta tell women what they want. You gotta show them. You can't let them tell you what they want, because what they say that they want is different than what they actually want. So anyway, the liberals have the youth culture. But here's the thing. This is what I noticed, right? You hear all this stuff, critical race theory. We're not teaching our kids to hate America, right? And they always jump up and they say this bullshit. But notice how, when it comes to the Second Amendment and the racist policies that surround the Second Amendment that were specifically designed against black people, ending the Saturday night specials, which means the Lorson, the Jimenez, the Cobras, the little 25 AC, 32 ACP guns, which basically killed the calibers because they got rid of the Saturday night. Those were the cheap guns that black people, could afford. Basically, a step below a high point. Those are the ones that they couldn't afford. Obviously, could afford, right? And then there were other policies. I think Louisiana and Alabama, they made these high-ass taxes on purchasing guns, right? The reason why you can't buy a gun across state lines, a handgun. You can buy a long gun, but you can't buy a handgun. And that was done, if I'm not mistaken, because, during the 1960s, when there was all that political unrest and assassinations and all that shit, they were like, we got to control these niggas. We got to make sure, well, we in Georgia, we know our niggas, and we don't want our niggas to be able to drive into South Carolina or North Carolina and purchase a handgun and then bring it back into the state. So each state regulate your niggas and make sure that they can't purchase handguns, right? Because we know how concealable they are, recognizing that handguns are immensely more dangerous than AR-15s. But again, the AR-15 wasn't a topic of the conversation at that time. But I'm saying, so they focus on, we got to get rid of the handguns, right? We got to control the handguns, make sure niggas can't get handguns because they can conceal them and we don't know where they are on their person. And it's scary, right? And we got to protect law enforcement. So they made that, even though by today, that whole system is irrelevant because you have the NICS background check, which was established in 1994 with another crime bill. So now you got the 1994 crime bill that basically says, you can't have the 1994 crime bill that did all the assault weapons ban and all that shit. But again, establish a national basically a national database, because let's face it, the 4473 is gun registration. So they know who has whatever. But with that, I'm like, why can't I go into a different state and buy a handgun? Why can't I? Why? Right? And then they got all these other schemes like New Jersey, for example, has permit to purchase. I think North Carolina has permit to purchase. So you have to get permission. If it pleases the crown, may I purchase a handgun? Right? So you got to get permission to get a handgun. Right? You can't just go in there and buy it like you can buy a long gun. Right? So I can buy all the assault weapons, all the AR-15s that I want, but I can't purchase, a handgun. Right? Like, I just can't go to a different state and purchase a handgun. So anyway, you look at these laws and the way that they were set up, right? And the right can just acknowledge, they say, oh, these laws are racist. They're so racist. Black people, look, this is why you need to support the NRA and gun rights, because these laws were racist. Okay, fine. They're racist. But notice how they can see that in defending their Second Amendment rights. They can see that with 2020 clarity. They can see that. But they can't see all the other stuff that's not gun related. The redlining, the blockbusting, the denial of FHA loans, COINTELPRO, right? Black men disproportionately being put on the front lines, during the Vietnam War. What else? What else is thrown up there? Housing covenants, racial housing covenants. Oh, you can't live in this neighborhood. We don't want blacks in this neighborhood. All these sorts of things that were done systematically. The urban renewal, the what else was 1956 Highway Commission Act. Hey, we got these established white communities. We need highways. Oh, but we don't want to run them through the already established white communities. Let's just displace the black people and move them out and give them a house voucher, put them in public housing, and do all that, basically destroying the economic centers and the main streets where the black businesses were, just running highways through them. Oh, they can't see that. Right, so when we talk about the Second Amendment, they can see that the system of white supremacy put things in place that systematically denied black people access to their Second Amendment rights. But somehow they want to argue that white supremacy stopped there And that all this other shit, the redlining, the blockbusting, the urban renewal, the denial of FHA loans, the CIA dumping drugs in the black community, the COINTELPRO, right? And all that, right? They can't see that. But yet and still, you sit there and you'll listen to these, white conservatives, and they'll talk about, the ATF, and then we need to abolish the ATF. Notice that, right? Black people jump up and say defund the police, which, I think that it's a misnomer, because it's really allocate resources into other areas when dealing with people with mental health, right? Because the cops show up, you got a son, he's schizophrenic, he's having an episode, and then they're like, pow, 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 pow. It's like, no, that's not the way you handle that situation. But notice, it's okay to say, abolish the ATF. Go Google search, YouTube. They're saying abolish the ATF all over the place. Now, quiet as it's kept, I also feel like the ATF should be abolished. But I'm saying, they're like, abolish the ATF. That's cool. Thumbs up to that. But when it comes to, defund the police, let's go with what the actual slogan is. You know what I mean? They're like, going crazy. No, we need to keep the police. Even though these are the same assholes that stormed the Capitol, right? Had an police officer killed, and other police officers assaulted, but we just overlooked that. That just gets swept underneath. Well, they were an enemy of the people. There's tyranny. See, again, I'm telling you, it's like the Division 2. You know what I mean? Like white people are like when you're in the dark zone in the Division, and they just go rogue. You know what I mean? And they decide at any given time when they want to go the rogue. Like when they want to be able to attack anybody that's around them, they hit the back button, and then bam, they go rogue, and the next thing you know, they're stealing your loot and they're running off to the helicopter, for the damn LZ. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go online, type in the dark zone, and you'll see what I'm talking about on YouTube. That's a nice little reference, that I can think of off the top of my head. But yeah, white people have the entitlement of, we get to decide when tyranny happens. We get to decide when police officers that 5 minutes ago Blue Lives Matter, we as white people get to decide when those officers are now tyrannical and they should lose their life. We get to decide that because we're white, goddammit. I mean, you want to talk about white entitlement? You can't get any more white entitlement than that. We reserve the right as white people to take out and engage in armed conflict against the very same law enforcement that we argue that black people need to fall in line and listen to, because if they don't, they're not complying, and that totally justifies them being gunned down 47 times or some bullshit like that. If they're only comply, I mean the internet is riddled with white people hypocrisy. I mean, it's like mind blowing. The level of hypocrisy. There's no purpose or goal to be, philosophically consistent or intellectually honest. No, that's not what they do. They operate in their own world of me. Everything is for me. I will use whatever mental gymnastics to support my position, and I won't even I will throw up so many non sequiturs, and I will throw up so many things that just completely ignore the preceding statement that it'll make your head spin. It'll make your head spin. Like, the crazy thing is like, speaking about the manosphere, it's like white conservatives do the exact same thing that the manosphere accuses women and feminists of doing. Which is like, you just got finished saying that men are oppressing you. Now you're running around talking about you can't find a man on your level. Like, how are men oppressing you if you're making more money than every guy that you've been on a date with? How are you being oppressed? Or like white people, when they jump up and they talk about all these black people are on welfare, and then turn around and then start talking about how effective affirmative action is and all black people are running around taking all the good jobs. Or when they go and they talk about the Mexicans coming across the border, stealing all the jobs, and then say, well, I'm white, I'm too good to pick strawberries, I don't work those type of jobs. I'm not working that job. I deserve full medical and dental. Goddamn it, I'm not cutting grass for $10 an hour. Fuck that shit, right? Talking out of both sides of their face. And again, the left, when they did their videos, it's real slick what they do, because they acknowledge everything that black people want to hear. They acknowledge all the racism. Yes, and we are, and white supremacy did this, and they kind of distance themselves from white supremacy. We're the left. We're not white supremacy. No, you're the left arm of the system of white supremacy, and conservatives are the right arm of the system of white supremacy. But what they do is they try to act like white supremacy is something separate from themselves when they're just covert white supremacy. So what they do is they go up there and they're like, yes, we're going to acknowledge all this, but we're the left. We don't have anything to do with this. But let's talk about this history, right? And again, when the right wants to defend its Second Amendment rights, it will also acknowledge that this is what went down, and black people, that's why you need to support us in the NRA, and you need to support Guns of America, and you need to support, all these other predominantly white Second Amendment groups, because these gun laws are racist. Now exercise your rights, even though at the end of the day, they really don't want black people exercising their rights like that. They turn on Fox News, they see all the, the inner city violence and whatnot, right? Which, as of this point, it's like, again, did I not predict that this was happen? I'm like, wait, you got 20 million job loss? I'm like, oh yeah, crime's going to go up. Crime's definitely going to go up. So get ready for it. I called that shit back in fucking March. I'm like, crime is going to go up. Get ready for it. So people see the shit now, they're like, oh, shit's getting crazy. And then the right goes, oh, it's because of defund the police, when virtually no police departments have been defunded. I'm like, what? Show me where these police departments are. I think the only one that's been defunded was they had one in Washington that was defunded. But like the NYPD and shit, they haven't been defunded. The bottom line is you've never had enough police officers to stop any sort of mass violence. It's the illusion of power. It's like a freaking having a dog with an electric fence, and he's getting zapped every time he goes across the invisible fence. And then you take the collar off, and he's not going to leave the yard, even though he doesn't even have the collar on. Why? Because all he remembers is, hey, I get zapped every time I go past this point. And that's kind of how law enforcement works in America. There aren't enough police officers to stop, mass, violence if people just got up one day and decided that they were going to engage in the purge. That's why that whole Capitol riot shit, that's why that shit didn't work. And so, when you look at, again, the U.S. military can't even stop, a bunch of Taliban individuals running around with AK-47s and sandals. So if you got an armed population of the United States and you want to talk about tyranny and hear all this nonsense, Joe Biden, oh, you need an F-15 and bullshit. It's so funny how the AR-15 is the most, the most dangerous weapon that there is, and it turns, Kyle Rittenhouse, or it turns Dylan Roof, or even though he didn't use an AR-15, but it turns, any mass shooter into, the most lethal person in the world. It's super effective, right? Then the left will turn around and then talk about how ineffective this same rifle is against the tyrannical government. I'm like, I thought it was ineffective. You just got finished saying how effective it is. Now you're running around telling me about how ineffective it is. I'm like, you're talking out of both sides of your face. Joe Biden, get a shotgun. Because the AR-15 is harder to aim, it's harder to shoot. No, the fuck it's not. But he loves to go up there and say that bullshit. You know what I mean? So again, you got to recognize when people are desperately trying to disarm you, and black people need to recognize that, because at the end of the day, the collective of white people are not black people's friends. They're just not. That's why they talk out of both sides of their face with their forked tongues. They're not. And the left keeps trying to paint this picture like, oh, they're better than freaking the people on the right. No, they're just more subtle with it. And this goes all the way back to freaking Malcolm X talking about, the freaking Democrats being the fox. They're just clever about it. They're not going to call you a nigga to the face, or they may not even use that word. They'll take it completely out of their vocabulary. But that doesn't mean that they don't still feel the same way that is embodied by that word about you. They're just not going to say it. And black people need to stop focusing so much on the symbolism and focus on tangibles and focus on, the reality that we're faced with. Neither party is for us. And what they do is they pander in their own little way and try to get you to come over on their side. Real talk, black people need their own party. Plain and simple. We need our own party. Now, that's not to say that it's going to be effective and all this other shit. You have people that talk about, no, what we need to do is we need to leave America because you can't have a nation within a nation, and we need to go somewhere else. Like there's just some land available for African Americans specifically to go to and operate from an African American point of, standpoint. Not just go and join, somebody else's culture and try to assimilate. There's plenty of black people that try to do that. They went to Ghana and they making videos talking about how, the Africans think that every African American is rich and overcharging them out the nose and everything else. There's all type of videos on YouTube about that. While the Ghanaian people are like, oh, come here and you can live here and everything else like that. And it's not that easy. It's not that easy to just pick up and go. So I just wanted to make that point because you got all these white people running around the internet screaming, oh, we don't subscribe to critical race theory. Critical race theory is a problem. Oh, but you see it. You see the critical race theory aspects when it comes to black people being denied their Second Amendment rights and how systematic it was. But you can't see what's systematic about redlining and blockbusting and denial of FHA loans and the COINTELPRO and, urban renewal and dumping drugs in the black community via the CIA and Oliver North underneath Ronald Reagan, who was pardoned by H.W. Bush. You see what I'm saying? So, these are the things that have to be, recognized by black people, and that's why I'm making this video. But people are bottom line is white people do not want it to be acknowledged. The fact that yes, America is rooted in racism and white supremacy. That's how it was set up. To benefit white people and black people. They weren't even considered people. They were chattel labor. They weren't even considered a part. I mean, go look at that quote from Thomas Jefferson about, hold on, let me read the quote. Let me find the quote. Because I sent it to somebody not too long ago. Where is the quote? The quote is, but as it is, we have the wolf by the ear, and we can neither hold him nor safely let him go. Justice is in one scale and self-preservation in the other. Thomas Jefferson on slavery. And you can follow that right up with Malcolm X's classic statement. No, the issue is that the white people's greatest fear is that black people, if they ever get any power or if they ever get any weapons or resources, that black people will pay white people back the favor and do unto white people as white people have done unto black people. That is the greatest driving fear when it comes to black socioeconomic and political empowerment. That is their greatest fear. Don't get me wrong. You could talk about, what was the guy's name? Jim Brown, the white savior, which, people always want to point out in these movies like Black Panther, got to have a white savior, right? Avatar, got to have a white savior, right? Dances with Wolves, got to have a white savior. Enemy Mine from 1986, got to have a white savior, right? All these movies got to have white saviors. Like I said, the only movie that didn't really have that, where the guy changed and stayed alien, was District B9. You had, what's his name? Jim Brown. I think he was like a Bible thumping, he was hardcore Christian, didn't want to see, wanted to be the end of slavery. Somebody snitched. Him and a bunch of other black people got decapitated and whatnot. They don't want another Bacon's Rebellion. They don't want black people that are and white people in the same socioeconomic strata of society. They do not want them, forming Voltron. Okay, they do not want them coming together and seeing the commonality of their socioeconomic, condition. They want them to fight, divide, and conquer. As long as they're fighting, they're not focused on us, they're focused on each other. And they use that. And that's what you see coming out of the mainstream, both CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News. That's what you see. But again, at the end of the day, see, what white people really want is they want to come off. They want to see, this is why, when you read Thomas Jefferson's statement, mind you, he's running around sleeping with Sally Hemings, and he's got a bunch of slaves himself, right? But they want to feel that they're moral and that they're just and that they're righteous. I mean, it's a blatant contradiction to all of the tenets that you see in the Bill of Rights, all of the ideas and concepts that are in the Constitution. And then you have the institution of slavery, which literally, takes the freedom of somebody else and throws it out the window for your own personal benefit and selfish gain. You see? And so, yeah, that's going to fuck with you. Yeah, it's a blatant contradiction. But, again, white people, they got to find some way to make it so white people aren't evil. And I was talking to a white guy a couple days ago, and I said, who you should really be mad about, or mad at? Your ancestors. Because your ancestors left you with the bill. They literally left you with the bill. Your ancestors went out and they had lobster and they were buying tables and shit, and they got a whole bunch of Cristal, and they were just gorging themselves. And then when the bill came, they were like, give that to my grandson, give that to my great grandson. Right? Literally, that's what they did. That's what they did with Social Security. Yes, we're going to have Social Security to take care of the elderly. And all of us are paying into Social Security. But when we're that old, we're not going to have Social Security. So then what's going to happen? Again, kicking the can down the road, right? And making the children have to deal with this situation. And see, this is why I'm going to say this to black people. I'm going to say this. Hopefully I only have to say this once. This is why black people cannot allow white people to get away with anything. Period. From this moment forward, black people cannot allow white people to get away with anything. And you know why we can't let them get away with anything? Because all they're going to do is get away with it. Then they die, right? The inequality's still there. And then they're going to say, because you didn't catch me while I was alive, even though what I did that was messed up benefits my children and my grandchildren, even though it benefits my children and my grandchildren, they don't owe you, or arguably the grandchildren will be the ones saying that they don't owe you. You see how that game is played? Right, so I go in there, I fuck you up, I take what I want, rape, pillage, and plunder, and then I say, I died, so I got away with it, even though I set up these systems of generational wealth where subsequent generations can be the beneficiaries of the original sin, right? But they don't have to, they're not somehow indebted to the original sin, right? Even though white Jesus can die on the cross for all of mankind's sins currently and thereafter. I'm like, the very concept of Christianity doesn't even add up at that point. We have all these concepts of groups and versus other groups, and groups can be wronged by groups and all this other stuff. And we understand how that works generationally. But when it comes to the system of white supremacy, when it comes to the apartheid situation that you see in South Africa, all of a sudden, that whole generational aspect, that generational debt, Oh no, we don't believe in that. No. We don't believe in that. No. We don't owe you. I didn't own any slaves, but you were the beneficiaries of slavery. You see? And you know how you can really say that? Because again, white people don't identify with their class position. They identify with their race position. And when you're identifying with your race position and all the benefits that come with your race position, you also have to accept the debt that comes with identifying with that race position. You see? But see, we already know that, white people aren't going to do that because, the hypocrisy that is the system of white supremacy. And again, mileage may vary. There's different levels of white supremacy. There's muhaha white supremacy. You know what I mean? And then there's, the subtle bigotry of low expectations type white supremacy. Right? It's not like every white person that has these sort of racial biases are card carrying members of the Klan. That's not how it works. But if you think they're about to give up their advantage all in the name of justice and the sweet twinkle of white Jesus in their eye, you got another thought coming. So for the sake of your children, when white people do some fucked up shit, you cannot allow them to get away with it, because they will try to, and the person that does the wrong, they will die, and then they will sit there and just kick the can down to the road to their children, and then their children will say, I don't owe you anything. And I'm like, okay, well that tells me, we can't let y'all motherfuckers off the hook for a motherfucking thing. Nothing. And I can hear the white supremacist in the background. Ha! Try it, nigger. Try it. I can hear them in the background talking right now. And on that note, I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to let the video end. But, so that's my video. SWP out.